Welcome back to biology. My name is Mr. Kubuske, and we're back here again to talk about evolution. Last time we left off, we talked about origins of life and where life could have possibly come from. We talked about how life on the planet started and how it changed over time, going from archaebacteria to eubacteria to eukaryotes, and kind of the time frame of that. So today we're going to talk about Darwin a little bit and his theories of evolution and some different theories of evolution that led Darwin, which I'm sure you know his name by now, to his theories of natural selection. Okay, so we're going to do a little storytelling here, so imagine with me. Let's think for a second, put our thinking caps on, where did giraffes come from? Okay, well, let's think about this. Once upon a time, here's our first story. Once upon a time, there was a little horse, right? All his little horse friends around. He looked a little different than all the other horses. Had spots kind of all over the place and a little mane. And but there were lots of horses, lots of different types of horses, all about the same size, and they all ate the same things, these trees and shrubs and things like that. So imagine if all these horses are eating the same thing, well, all the trees at that level are going to be eaten up, but there's still leaves up above, right? And I'm really hungry, and I really want those leaves up above, so I stretch my neck. Each day I stretch a little bit further, and sure enough, one day, my neck's a little bit longer, and I'm able to eat those leaves. How about that? So I gobble up all those leaves. Well, then I want the leaves even higher. So what do? Well, I stretch my neck, and what happens? Well, sure enough, my neck got longer. And I would do this day after day after day, and what do you know? Sooner or later, I become a giraffe. Makes sense, right? Think about it. I wanted a longer neck. I needed a longer neck, so I stretched. I did something to get that longer neck, and I got that neck, right? Well, what's wrong with this theory? Well, think about what we know about biology from all the stuff we've learned so far. We know that DNA controls our traits, and our traits, are pretty much determined for us. We can't really change them. So that's what's wrong with this theory. But this actually was a theory proposed by a guy by the name of Jean-Baptiste Lamarck. And it was one of the first kind of theories of evolution that kind of tied some of the different trains or schools of thought at that time together. And he called it evolution based on acquired characteristics. And what he thought acquired characteristics were that what you change, or however you change in your lifetime, then that's how you pass on your traits as. So in other words, like if I wanted a longer neck and I stretched and I got that longer neck, then I could pass it on to my kids and they would automatically have longer necks. Okay, so however you change personally during your life, your kids change. Well, if you think about that in human terms, that would mean if I get big, swollen, buff like this, that's obviously my picture, you can tell. Okay, then that means my kids would automatically look like this without ever having to do anything. Obviously, we know that's not right. DNA controls traits. But you got to remember, this is before they knew anything about DNA. Lamarck, this is back 1800s, even earlier than that even. He was coming up with this theory. So, give him a little credit for at least trying to put something out there. But obviously, we know that this is an incorrect theory of evolution, and this is not how life on the planet changes. Okay. So, he actually published a paper in 1801 called The Theory of Inheritance of Acquired Characteristics, widely accepted and scrutinized at the time. But still, a pretty good theory nonetheless. So let's go to story number 2. Once upon a time, okay, bring it. Once upon a time, face. Okay, there was a species of finch that lived off the coast of Ecuador. In case you're not familiar, Ecuador is a little country on the Pacific Ocean in South America. Now, some of these finches were angry birds, just angry all the time. I know that was funny, right? Okay, some of them were nice. Okay. One day, a group of these finches were flying off the coast looking for food. And all of a sudden, they got lost. A windstorm kicked up, or a storm kicked up, and blew them off course, and they couldn't find their way back home. So they searched, and suddenly in the distance, land ho! So they're heading for land, right? We're exhausted. We got to get back. Look how happy we are that we finally found land. Okay. So they come in for a landing, and they are coming in for that landing. They land on a group of islands that we now know as the Galapagos Islands. And here they found plenty of seeds to eat, lots of warm weather, and most importantly, no predators. They didn't have to keep looking over their shoulder. Nothing was trying to eat them. That is a pretty good deal for a bird, right? Pretty happy again. Gonna do my happy dance. Yeah. So, if the finches decide to stay on this island with lots of food, warm weather, plenty of places to live, and no predators, what's going to happen to their population? Well, let's find out. Oh, there they are. Yeah, populations go growing and growing and growing. Almost growing to the point where we don't have enough seeds. You can see the seeds, the amount of them got smaller. So what happened to our food? Well, our food diminished because our population got too big. So what's going to happen to the finches? Well, obviously they're going to start to die off unless some of them that can't compete as well to get that food source, find something else to eat. Maybe they move to a different location. Well, some of them will die off, sure. Well, some of them may move on because they found a better source of food that matches what they can do. If I have a little bit stronger beak, maybe I can crack these nuts that nobody else can, and I can maybe survive on this island over here eating nuts. So I separate myself. Well, over time, I've got nut eaters and seed eaters. What do you think will happen to our two populations? Well, on the nut island, okay, then we're going to keep seeing the trait that's best for that specific habitat keep popping up, which is bigger, stronger beaks to crack those nuts. Whereas on the other island with just the seeds, maybe I don't need necessarily a bigger beak, but maybe I need a better, more precise beak in order to pick up those seeds. And that's exactly what we start to see. But again, as we get these traits and they start spreading through our population, some of us are going to be better suited to get these food sources than others. So the others will either die or they'll go find somewhere else where they can find a better source of food, something that fits them better. And that's exactly what happens. So what caused the differences in the beaks? Well, it's actually genetic variation. It was small changes, mutations in the DNA that caused the differences. It's not like I went to the island that had the nuts on it and that automatically gave me a stronger beak. No, that's not how it works. But if I had just a little bit stronger beak, then I had a better chance at survival than everybody else, and I could crack those seeds and get the food. Why didn't the beaks change on the first island? Well, they didn't need to. Remember, what was there was what they were already suited for, was eating seeds. And which finch is going to be best suited for life on Santa Cruz? Okay, that's the ones with the bigger, stronger beaks because they can crack the nuts. Okay. So what about this other island? What might the finches look like here where they have tree-burrowing insects are the food source? Well, the finches on this island actually have learned to use a tool. They've learned a behavior that they've passed on in their population where they use a stick to get the burrowing insects out. Kind of interesting. Here on the cacti, what we start to see is finches with longer feet. Or longer legs, okay? So that way the needles on them don't affect them as much, and they're able to dig down. You can see his little beak, how sharp it is. He can dig into the cacti to get the food and the water inside. So what you start to notice is that we keep seeing these changes occur, but the changes are all based on the food source or something that gives them an advantage to the place that they live. So what controls the population size? Well, lots of things: predator, food, environment, etc. Okay? And we have small differences in every population. Some of those differences make us better fit to our environment, and our population will change because the ones that are better able to survive will reproduce and the others won't because they'll die out. Well, believe it or not, this is exactly what Charles Darwin identified when he visited the Galapagos Islands back in the 1800s. What he was actually an English naturalist. He just wanted to study nature, and in order to do that during his time, you actually had to get on a ship and sail around the world with people that were actually shipping goods. And you just kind of went along for the ride and took data, wrote things down, and drew pictures. This is exactly what Darwin did. This was after he failed out of medical school, by the way. But anyway, so he sailed on a boat called the HMS Beagle. It left from England. It toured the world, went on a crazy trip. In one of the stops, at each one of the stops, he would collect different plant animal species. Some of them he would preserve. Some of them he would keep alive. Some of them he would just draw pictures of. But what he started to notice was that in each of these places, the organisms were unique, but at the same time, they were really similar to the other places, the other species on places right by there. For example, the Galapagos Islands is not far from Ecuador. Ecuador, there's finches and tortoises and the same type of animals that you'll see on the Galapagos. They look a lot alike, but the difference was the ones on the Galapagos Islands were better suited to their environment based on usually the food source. Okay. So let's talk about his observations. He understood that variations exist in every population. Some of us have long necks, some of us have short necks, some of us have a bigger pinky toe than others, okay, whatever it may be. Okay, but there's variations in every population. Some of those variations give us a better advantage over our counterparts and give us a better chance to survive and reproduce. Over time, those traits will keep popping up in a population because I'm the only one that has this trait and I keep reproducing. And then we have fossil evidence that shows that this is actually what occurred. And Darwin had that same evidence based on the species that he saw living and the fossils that he collected during his voyages as well. Okay, so what he referred to this as was adaptive radiation. It was his term for how the one species evolved into all these other ones. Okay, and if you think about like radiating out in a circle, you can see kind of the diagram. And this is similar to the one that he concocted. Okay, we're going to skip this part. Don't worry about that. Okay, So let's talk about adaptations a little bit. Okay, look at the different finches here. What adaptations do they have? Well, each one has an adaptation that makes them better suited to their food source. On the first one, you can see that big, strong beak for cracking nuts. On the second one, we have the longer legs and the sharper beak for digging into the cacti. And the third one, we have that small, more precise beak for catching those little ground insects there. Okay, so each one has an advantage over the other for their food source. And again, they did this so they no longer had to compete with one another. It gave me an advantage. If I don't have to compete with anybody, I can get more food and I have a better chance of survival. So it's not like they fought. That's not the type of competition that we're talking about. It's that, I'm going to die if I don't get food. I have to find another food source. I use that food source, and then as I reproduce and survive, as I have these changes that keep popping up in the population, those get passed on that make people better able to survive. So Darwin's two theories that he put together. Oh, I apologize. Need to do some things. Anyways, the first one, descent with modification. The idea that newer forms of life are just modified descendants of older species or older animals of the same type. In other words, if I look at the fossils of a whale and I track it backwards, I can see how they've changed over time to the point where they were once something like a wolf that lived near a shoreline. The second one, modification by natural selection. The reason we have these changes occur is that the environment will limit the growth of populations, and the ones that survive are the ones that have the traits that make them able to survive, but the traits that help them in that environment specifically. Okay, and that's important. Not every trait is going to be perfect everywhere. I'm sure a nice warm coat in the Arctic is not going to be too great if I live in the rainforest. Okay, think about that. All right, survival of the fittest. Oh my gosh, I just got pop-ups everywhere. I apologize. All right, moving on. Okay. So you can see the three questions here. Why are more and more elephants being born without tusks? Well, you got to remember, poachers are killing elephants for their tusks. So if an elephant is born without a tusk, it has a better chance of surviving because the poachers aren't going to go after it. So we keep seeing more and more elephants being born without tusks. Why do some pesticides used in the 20th century not work in the 21st? Because if it kills 99.9% of bacteria or whatever, well, then that 0.01% survives and reproduces. Well, the next time you go to spray it, the only bacteria left that were the descendants of the one that was immune to the pesticide or to the bactericide. Okay, so that they are all able to survive. So that's how we get the super bugs and things like that, the super germs, because they're all immune to the things that we keep spraying on them. And why are male cardinals red? They're red because they want to attract a mate. It gives them a better chance to reproduce in their population. So finally, Darwin wrote a book called On the Origin of Species. He saved it till late in his life to actually write because he was afraid he would be persecuted. We'll skip that. And it looks like that's all we've got for today. So again, Darwin, natural selection, On the Origin of Species. Lamarck, acquired characteristics. Not a good idea, okay? But again, those changes come from mutations in your DNA, okay? It's not like you personally will change. That is not the way it works. It's that when you have kids, they will be a lot like you, but each one is going to be unique, and sometimes that uniqueness gives them a better chance of survival. If you have questions, feel free to contact me. I love talking about this stuff. It's so much fun. Wish I had more time, but until the next time, see you later.